Hello again, everyone. My name is Tishana Threat, and I am a records management analyst from the Library of Virginia. I want to thank you all again for carving out time today on a snowy day to attend the very first webinar of 2025, presented by the Records Analysis Services session. Today's webinar is a survival guide of a records officer, which will be recorded and available for reference on the Library of Virginia's Records Management YouTube page. For today's webinar, participants are encouraged to ask questions. The host would answer all questions at the end of the presentation. Please feel free to drop questions in the chat box as well, and I will ensure to ask those questions on your behalf if someone would not like to unmute themselves. I am excited to share that this webinar will be hosted by two exceptional records professionals hailing from different states in the nation. Our first host, Ashley White, is the records officer of TennCare, which is the Medicare and Medicaid agency for the state of Tennessee. Ashley has an extensive career tenure in archives and museums and is knocking out her second master's degree in public administration. Ashley holds down the fort at TennCare by providing records management guidance to 30 departmental records custodians. Our next host is Mackenzie Ryan, who is the Assistant University Records Officer at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. She rightfully holds her Master's in Library and Information Science and Master's of Art and Popular Cultural Studies. Mackenzie's expertise has sharpened as she has worked for Texas State Libraries and Archives, Travis County Clerk's Office, and at the Minnesota Historical Society. The Records Analysis Service section has developed 6 core responsibilities of a records officer in the effort to maintain an effective records management program within an agency. When developing and maintaining a program, consistent communication is important. Getting yourself accustomed to the retention schedule should be a norm. To sustain the importance of records management, routine training for your agency is essential. Your role of a records officer includes improving records destruction. Lastly, it is critical for your agency to identify its essential and archival records in the efforts to create a disaster recovery plan. With these six core responsibilities are generalized, the Records Analysis Service section understands the reality has to be faced when trying to achieve these responsibilities. Common questions are, where do I start? How does a records officer keep the agency on board with records management? Also, as a records officer, you may wonder, what advice is there when your plans as a records officer doesn't go as planned? And this is where I hand off the presentation today to our two hosts to provide tips and tactics for you to be a successful records officer.
Before we begin, I want to emphasize that what Ashley and I say today is based on our own experiences. We acknowledge that our advice is not one size fits all. Some of our recommendations may not work for you, and some of the things we talk about today may be new to you, but you may also be doing these things already. Our goal and hope is that you can take away something from today's presentation to adapt and use in your own work.
And to your second point, in that same vein, we might use some unfamiliar or seemingly misplaced language. So, for example, in Tennessee, our retention schedules are called RDAs, Records Disposition Authorizations. It's common for me to use the acronym RDA, but that might not mean anything to you. So if we use a term or a title that's a little unfamiliar, or if it seems like we're using it incorrectly, feel free to call it out. We'll figure out the Virginia version of the term. Our field isn't huge, but we have definitely managed to diversify the job titles.
As a records officer, you'll encounter a lot of different challenges. While it's impossible for us to predict all those challenges, we want to cover some topics that will help you succeed in your role, a survival guide, if you will. We'll talk about building relationships and implementing organizational structure. Then we'll cover routine records management training and what to do when you fail. After all this, we'll do Q&A. Relationship building is a foundational part of our work as records management professionals. Even the best records management programs cannot be successful without good working relationships. It's also a difficult part of our work as many of us are constantly in a state of building and rebuilding relationships as staff come and go.
So, on the topic of foundational ideas in records management, this first bullet point is a major one, and you're definitely going to want to make sure you build those good relationships. Similarly to every relationship you've ever had in your life, it takes time. So, that's point number two, be patient. One thing that you'll want to do early and often is to reinforce your role as the support system. My coworkers see me as an authority on all things records, and I reinforce that. You want them to know who you are and how to get in touch with you. If they have that knowledge, they can seek you out with any question. And you'll reinforce that role by following the steps on this second point, the marathon, not a sprint. Your role is to always be there in a positive way.
So, how do you build and maintain meaningful relationships across an organization? If you're not sure where to start with building relationships, or sometimes you feel stuck, here are some tips that Ashley and Mackenzie have found helpful for building and maintaining relationships in their own work environments.
So at TennCare, we had a records manager prior to my arrival in 2021, but records management was a side job for him. He actually worked in fiscal and contracts, so he was pretty busy. He did an amazing job, absolutely. There's no doubt about that. But his time in a given work week meant that some things just naturally had to fall by the wayside. And so when I came in, I wanted to set structure. So I met with all the departmental custodians within a month of starting at TennCare, and I devoted half of our meeting to getting to know them on a personal level. I wanted to know who to go to if I want to talk about sports. Who can I talk about dogs to? I get some great new recipes. Those initial meetings didn't solve any of our problems, but it put me on a good footing with 30 new people, and it gave us something to talk about in the future. But I also let them know what my goals were. And they were then able to tell me what their concerns and hesitations were. So I built that into my plan. We started doing a whole lot of new things based on recommendations from our records custodians. They saw me doing something about their complaints, which strengthened the relationship. So, this rapport, again, cannot be rushed. It can only be built on. And it's going to take a while to build that trust and to ensure that people are thinking about records.
So, as Ashley said, relationships are not built overnight. As much as I would like people to trust my guidance and understand that I'm trying to help, this isn't always the case. Sometimes people are skeptical or they have a lot of anxiety about how compliance with records management may add to their already busy workloads. Sometimes people are anxious about going to jail or getting in trouble if they don't do the right thing. So there's a lot for us to manage here. To give you an example from my own work, I had a department on campus that was very hesitant to work with me on records management. As easy as it could be to get discouraged by their hesitation, I let them know that I was available and ready to help them whenever they needed. In cases like this, I try not to be too pushy unless there are immediate issues that we need to address. With this group, it took at least a year for them to open up to working with me. And it wasn't because they were super eager to do so. What ended up happening is they ran into an issue where they needed a new records retention schedule for some records they had. Again, there was still some hesitation, but we started working together, albeit very slowly. And we're still working on things a year and a half later, but I try not to rush them and I give them plenty of time and space. And while this may seem unnecessary to some, in this case, I think that being patient, present, and kind has been helpful to building our relationship and has led them to being more receptive to integrating records management into their workflows. Really, all this means is that things may not go smoothly the first, second, or third time you work with people. People may not understand that you are trying to help. However, your presence, perseverance, and patience can go a long way in establishing trust and calming anxieties that may come with records management.
Our third point here is again built on the foundation of those first two. You're the records person. You are the expert. If you don't set a good example, if you don't have passion or at least a presumption of joy about your job and be the records management person, no one at your organization is going to do it either. You are the champion. Elevate awareness through celebrating accomplishments. If you are able to reduce the amount of physical storage from 1,000 cubic feet to 100, make sure to tell the people above you how much money they're saving now. A public records request comes in that involves basically every employee at your 1,500 person organization. Send an email afterwards thanking everybody for pulling together and finding something to praise. We closed it quickly. We've got a new process in place for future large requests. Whatever it is, brag about it. Brag on them, brag on you, brag on records management. The opposite half of that is that you also have to be comfortable being the squeaky wheel. If you manage FOIA requests and don't have software, that's a really great ask. There's a billion reasons that you can use to demonstrate the need, and I'll help you write it up. Money is always going to be a factor, but often when senior leadership sees what you can do on a shoestring, they'll give you a little bit longer of a shoestring.
It's always important to set clear expectations about what is expected, both from the people you're supporting and what they can expect from you, especially if there's any kind of deadline involved. Clear expectations for everyone involved is helpful to building trust, and it helps you build consistency. People know they can depend on you for your guidance, and they know what they need to be doing in compliance with records management requirements. From my own work, anytime that I reach out to people or they reach out to me, I always make sure I establish and clarify expectations. And I do this from the very beginning. I make sure that I verify what is needed. I ask if there's a deadline or I'll provide them with one. I clearly state the work that I myself are going to do and the other people what they need to do, and etc. I also follow up with people to make sure all of us understand the status of the work that we're doing together.
Along with the rapport with those that you work with to implement a records management program, it is important to develop connections with other records officers. The Library of Virginia has a listserv called VAROL, in which records officers across the Commonwealth can connect and ask questions to other records professionals. This is an opportunity for all to learn how others execute practices within their state agency or locality. Also, if applicable, I highly recommend for records professionals and officers to partake in records management related professional development opportunities. There are a number of national level organizations such as NAGARA. Also, on the state level here in Virginia, is a great organization for those to join called Virginia Association of Government Archives and Records Administrators, also known as VAGARA. VAGARA has an annual conference that is a great space for connection and meeting other professionals to combat the duties of records management within the Commonwealth. At the end of the day, by building relationships with a variety of individuals, internally and externally, you are enhancing your abilities to become more confident in your role as a records officer.
So, just some concluding thoughts on building relationships. Building relationships is a lot like growing a garden. You need to have fertile ground to plant the seeds, nurture with sunlight and water, and pull the weeds. This is similar to what we do when we build and maintain relationships. We start from a place where we can plant the seeds of support and trust. We nurture with consistency and patience, and then we can watch the opportunities and collaboration bloom.
So, as I mentioned earlier, I came to TennCare in 2021 and I took over from somebody who had retired, and records management was sort of a part time thing for him. Uh, so, our policies and things were a little less full than I wanted them to be. We definitely had met all of the bases, but I decided to take a little bit more of a hardline direction and have a fuller library of documented policies and procedures. And no doubt, the first year or two was an absolute growth experience for me, tooling and retooling my approach and my goals. I mean, I would set out with a goal and ultimately determine that that's not the direction we needed to go and change course. Now, though, I'm in year 4, we've hit our stride. Consistency has helped everybody get so much more comfortable. And I do truly hope to one day describe it as a comfortable experience for everybody. But now, when I email and ask about records, the responses are much easier. There used to be a lot more back and forth, but now they know what I need. I know what they need. Speaking to what Mackenzie just said, consistency gives way to trust. A great way to ensure that everybody is consistently consistent is to have documented policies and procedures. When questions arise, you can point to a master document. So, for example, an electronic records retention policy that strictly lays out naming schema, metadata requirements, or documentation on proper labeling. I also suggest keeping this information in at least one easily accessible place. I have a physical copy on my desk, but also electronic copies. If your organization has an intranet or an employee-only portal, it's a fantastic place to put that. That doesn't mean that they're going to remember to use it, but it's something you can easily just send a link to. Ensure that these are up to date annually. And this annual review is going to give you a chance to check all the contact information, legal citations, technical advancements, new processes. You make sure all of that is still in place. It's also a good time to expand the document to include new information, tools, processes, whatever you've faced in the last year.
While there are a lot of things that are unique to every organization, there are a lot of things that are standard or best practice across the field of records management. Don't be afraid to look around to other state agencies or other governmental entities to borrow or get ideas on creating guidance documents or other things that may support your work. Our records management program, for example, borrows some of our training documentation from our state Department of Administration. We also talk frequently to other state and university records officers across the state to see what they're using in their trainings and guidance. For example, we've reused guidance on managing email and other electronic records. There will be situations where you need to create documentation from scratch. But if you can't, don't be afraid to reach out to other records officers for help. More than likely, they've faced similar challenges and needs. I know I've helped others, and I've also reached out to other people for help as well.
Next are assessments. Assessments can range in size from a complete list of every single record in existence within your organization, all the way down to an individual spot checking their work area. Tennessee requires all state agencies to undergo a full organizational records assessment every 4 years from the Secretary of State's office. They open every single drawer of every single cabinet in every single room of the building. They check our labeling, our file structures, privacy or legal concerns, literally everything. The end result is a report that's filed again with the Secretary of State's office. And a negative assessment, if they come in and they say your records are being mismanaged, that can trigger a state or a federal audit, depending on the type of records being kept. So there are definitely some great reasons to keep everything in order. That's just the super high level example, though. More commonly, the departmental records custodian and I will walk through their area. And this gives me an opportunity to make recommendations where I can. I'm not all over this building every single day looking in every corner. So this gives me an opportunity to see what's going on, what needs we have to address, what questions the custodians have. And it's also led to this discovery of an entire room of records that only one person knew about, but it wasn't me. So now there are 2 people who know about that room. Thankfully, though, we were able to work through properly labeling the boxes and were able to determine actually that a really great number of them were past retention and were ready for destruction. Whatever you have the bandwidth for, A regularly scheduled assessment is going to keep you aware of your needs and priorities.
Regardless of where your records management program is in terms of developing structure, whether you're starting from scratch or you're well established, we highly recommend taking time to evaluate your program's needs. Think about what kinds of questions are you getting from the people that you support? Are there new issues that need to be addressed? One of the issues that we are starting to address here on our campus is how the new ADA accessibility guidelines may affect records management across campus. Our campus records management program has also been involved with drafting guidelines for the usage of AI in campus meetings as well. You can leverage the relationships you have with others to ask them what they feel is missing. This could be done with a survey, focus group, coffee chats, or any other outside the box ways of engaging with people. Provide them with opportunities to give positive and constructive feedback. Have specific questions about what is working and what isn't. One way in my own work that I've tried to capture feedback is doing a records management needs survey for our 72 statewide university extension offices. I was interested in what issues they're having difficulty with and what types of training mediums that they preferred. There are a lot of issues that we need to continually look out for and assess how records management factors into what's going on. Doing this on a periodic basis helps me continue to build and maintain organizational structure within our records management program.
I'm sure this is not new information, but if you're trying to implement a new process, it's only going to work if you can follow through on it. So if you decide to do a quarterly training schedule, but it's too much of a struggle, I suggest other options. You can record several and send them out on a schedule, or you can reduce the office trainings, the official trainings to biannual or annual. In the interim, you can send short emails about upcoming retention schedules, open office hours, or other records management interest items. I personally asked our agency HR, TennCare's HR, not the big state of Tennessee HR, to incorporate a recorded 30-minute introduction to records management as part of onboarding. All legal trainings now include records management information, and I'm working with some of our other units to include relevant records info on other trainings. It can be big, like an entire quarterly hour-long records training, or something small like those little mentions in the legal trainings. Even those small mentions help to train people to think about how much the world of records encompasses. And the goal is to get people to think of records as a larger piece that they don't have to obsess over, but they do need to be mindful of. The trainings I do are quarterly, 45 minutes long, and they're recorded. We host prior trainings for any new employees or any rewatches. So very similar to what LVA has set up for y'all. My video on the basics is now a required part of new employee hiring. Every quarterly training topic is different. I've covered everything from electronic records to disaster recovery. I get feedbacks on my topics, and I select new topics based on recent or any upcoming challenges or news stories to try and keep it relevant. But there's three sections to each training. The topic, how it affects you as a records custodian, and how it affects our agency as the whole. A regular training schedule can definitely do several things. It's going to reinforce those established practices and procedures, build consistency and trust, and it keeps the line of communication open. This is definitely, again, an area where I can speak as a true expert. I've got a lot of bad ideas, and I'm so good at implementing them and then doing an autopsy at the inevitable end. I've learned that I get a better education from my failures than from my successes. For example, I thought it might be useful to send out a quarterly report to all of our custodians listing the boxes that they currently have in offsite storage and which of those boxes I was planning to destroy within the next 3 months. Before I even got started, I spoke to the custodians There was some mild interest. Some of them were interested in seeing their boxes, and some of them, not so much. It did create a million questions and lots of confusion. I tailored each report to the individual custodian, but some boxes were so old and there were questions about who the custodian actually should be. There were way more questions about what the custodians were supposed to do with the information that I was emailing them, which is something I thought we had clarified in the beginning, but I was still getting those questions. Ultimately, I ended up creating more records that were not helpful or useful. It took several days of my time to get it all together. I cluttered up inboxes. So now I run the report on request. I have for the last year. I've had 0 takers. I learned a ton about how to approach my custodians with something like this. I don't think I asked the right questions in the beginning. And I don't think my explanation for why I wanted to do this was really understood. At the end of the day, this just did not need to be done.
I think Mackenzie lost audio. Are you good, Mackenzie? No. Okay, so our other host has lost audio. I'm going to fill in for her. Failure is inevitable. It can be unexpected and unplanned. Even if you plan and craft everything carefully, there are always ways that you can't account for. This is especially true when working with others. When Mackenzie fails or things don't go quite according to plan, you try to make some time to fully understand why something failed. Maybe everything was planned perfectly. The timing was off. Maybe there were details that Mackenzie missed and she could go back and improve on for the next time. Either way, Mackenzie finds the importance to examine why something didn't work. You can do this by talking to your colleagues. For example, the survey that Mackenzie did to try to determine what people needed out of records management. It was a short survey, and she was very optimistic about it. She got a lot of less feedback than she had hoped for, and she thought it was a failure. In talking to others, it was pointed out that while Mackenzie didn't get a large amount of feedback, the quality of the feedback that she was receiving was really good. Sometimes you have to fail. I'm sorry, sometimes when we fail, we have to have the ability to honestly examine the situation and learn from it. We also have to not be afraid to talk to others. Getting feedback or being reminded that maybe things weren't as much as a failure as you thought it could have been. But it's all about how you assess that. It is also help others who may be struggling with the same issues as you.
Absolutely. Just like to point out, we did a lot of preparation, and at no point did we plan for audio failures. So, perfect slide, I guess. Failure is not fun. It's hard to shake off. It can be embarrassing. Do not carry that weight around with you, though. The best thing you can do is to look at the situation objectively and implement the lessons you've learned. If you don't implement the lessons, you've learned nothing, and you're just going to repeat it. What didn't work? Ask yourself, ask your stakeholders, rethink your plan. It is only a defeat when you decide that you have been defeated. As a closing note, I want to try and bring it back full circle. So at the beginning, the very first point that we made was about consistency. Hopefully you see that as the vein that runs through this entire presentation. And specifically on that first slide, I spoke about you presenting yourself as the go-to records person and the importance of people knowing how to reach out with questions. Y'all have resources. You've got your amazing team of analysts. Mackenzie and I are happy to answer any questions or provide any feedback or insight on anything we've spoken about. You don't need to know everything. You just need to know who to call, and that is LVA.
In closing, being a records officer comes with critical responsibilities, and as you are accounting for the management and accessibility of records within your agency. As you operate in your role, it is imperative to understand that you are subjected to face challenges and successes. To be effective, it takes time, consistency, transparent communication, and willingness to learn. As you navigate as a records officer, No matter if you are new to the role or a bit more seasoned, don't be afraid to reach out to your assigned Library of Virginia records management analyst to assist you. The role of a records officer requires relationship building. This includes building a rapport with your assigned analysts, personnel within your agency that handle records, and also senior level management. Today's host and myself hope that the information shared is helpful and gives you more clarity on how to handle being a records officer and tips to continue to do your absolute best. Here is Ashley's and Mackenzie's contact information. I'm going to go ahead and have this slide up for you for a couple of seconds. If not, you can reach out to me to get their direct email. But we're going to go ahead and open up the floor for any type of questions you all may have. I'm going to stop sharing now. All right. Can you all see Tishana now? Okay, perfect. So you can definitely put your questions in the chat box, or you are more than welcome to unmute yourself. And I'm going to look in there now. We will have the recording up on the Library of Virginia's Records Management YouTube page. We're going to send a message out via Vero to let you know when that has been posted on the YouTube page. Some more. Any
Can I
other?
ask a question?
Yeah.
Hi, my name is Sharon, and I'm with Henrico County Voter Registration. When she said that she reached out to the custodians for the records, and she felt that it wasn't necessarily a great idea, I'm trying to figure out why that happened. I know people don't always, other departments don't always see records as important as we do. So I'm just trying to figure out what was the problem with her asking for the custodian to let them know it was time for destruction of their records.
Sure. And that one, I think there are a lot of background details that probably do factor into that. So at TennCare, we do have physical records in the building. We also have about 30,000 boxes, 30,000 cubic feet of physical records that the state stores for us. And I call it offsite storage. The custodians never see those boxes. They don't touch those boxes. They've never had anything to do with those. Essentially, once it's decided that the box is ready to go to offsite storage, it's shipped there. The custodian never has to interact with it again. Essentially, what I was trying to do is reintroduce them to all of their boxes and add that additional, they're doing all of their regular jobs. All of our record custodians have that as an add-on piece to their job. So I'm not sure if it's the same way in Virginia. I'm the only dedicated records person at TennCare, and we have about 1,500 employees. So each department selects a person and says, records is also your job. You're going to have to talk to Ashley every once in a while. So it was an additional piece. It was an add-on piece that a lot of them had never experienced before. They really, I don't think, knew what to do with it. And that's my failure. I didn't set that up strongly enough in the beginning. I didn't, I guess, let them in on the plan, the goals, the reasons behind it, as well as I thought that I had. So that failure is on me. But essentially, they do handle the destruction of records in office and in the building, but I have always handled the offsite destruction. I was trying to bring them into that, and they just didn't want it, or quite frankly, didn't need it. And that was a lesson that I learned. Does that answer the question, Sharon?
Yes, it answers the question. Thank you.
Thank you.
We had a question in the chat box. How do we get a list of items that were previously disposed? We have a lot of new staff and wanted to make sure we are up to date and all required items are disposed of. So Carl, you can definitely follow up with your records management assigned analysts, but all of the completed RM3s or certificate of records destruction have been are in our public records. You can look at it on the completed form search on the Library of Virginia Records Management page to see what certificates of records destruction have been disposed of starting in 2021. Prior to that, those certificates were mailed to the Library of Virginia. But if you work with your records analysts, they can tell you what's going on with your specific agency or locality. I hope that answered your question for you. Going through the chat even more to see if there are any more questions. Nope, I'm going to go ahead and mute myself. Did anyone else want to unmute themselves and ask any questions?
While we're waiting, I just want to acknowledge Jan's comment, because I think there's one thing that, and we talked a little bit about that in our presentation today, but don't hesitate to reach out to other records officers, even again across your state or other places, because I feel like that's a really big source of strength and support. Even being able to like talk about our failures, I think is really difficult. And I've only been able to do that when I saw somebody actually at Nagara who I knew from previous jobs, and she is now in a new job, but I always was like, she is the records management queen. And I heard her talking about some of her failures, and I was like, wow, I didn't know, I wouldn't have guessed that she failed at something, but it was like incredibly brave to watch her talk about that. And it provided me with like, oh, okay, if I'm ever in a situation, you know, what I can do differently. So I think if, especially if you're a newer records officer, or new to records management, or your program is kind of, you know, looking for some structure, don't be afraid to reach out, because you're definitely not alone. Not in your state, not in your community. You have a whole world of people in records management that probably have experienced the same things that you are.
Absolutely. And I'll just jump in super quick just to echo Mackenzie and that point. Also at Nagara, because that's where all the good things happen, apparently. I was in a small group session last year back in June or July, and it was a state records manager breakout session, basically. But anyway, one of the issues somebody brought up was employee offboarding. And okay, this person is leaving, whether they've chosen to or not, but what do we do with all their records? What records do they even have? So that was one of those documented policies and procedures I came up with, was an employee offboarding checklist in conjunction with HR. We worked on it together, that specifically spoke about records and litigation holds and what to do with those, and making sure the employee has seen me and talked to me before they left. And I emailed that form to like 15 people over the course of the next hour. So you may think you're facing a really unique, weird situation. I guarantee you there are people out there who can help you with it, because we've gone through it before. So definitely don't ever hesitate to reach out. Use whatever community chats or forums you've got through Vigara, Nagara, wherever. Those daily digests actually have been super helpful to me, the community chats.
And I have two people asking, could the offboarding checklist be shared?
I will send it to you, and if you don't mind sending it out, if that's all right.
That is totally fine. Yes. Well, I don't see any more yet, but I want to say another thank you again to both Ashley and Mackenzie. The Library of Virginia, we graciously appreciate you helping out Virginia and understanding that records management is consistent all over the board. Like you said, Ashley, some of your jargon may be different from Virginia, but we face the same challenges. So it's nice to hear that someone in a whole different state is experiencing challenges and also successes that we can share. Today was a prime example for everyone to understand networking and understand if you collaborate with someone else, they may have information or tools that you can learn from. So use Vayroll. Go ahead and connect with Mackenzie and Ashley to ask more questions if you want to. But also build a rapport with your Library of Virginia records management analysts. We are here for you and to make sure you're educated and confident in what you do. Other than that, that is the end of our webinar today. Thank you both for making this a success, and we look forward to working in the future. Everyone, I hope you have a great day.